Ime Udoka is the new head coach. And now that we're finally, getting into camp and practices are underway, and I know there's only so much that you guys are able to watch when you're down there, and obviously you're paying attention, you're listening, you're getting a feel for the guy beyond just those introductory press conferences when he was hired and whatever we've been able to gauge from his experience with Team USA. But what do you find you're learning about Ime Udoka this early on?
I think he's a tough coach, but I think it's, kind of there's an element of tough empathy there where he's a player's coach and guys really like him, but he holds people accountable. And that's sort of been his reputation in Brooklyn and Philly and San Antonio. A lot of guys that come out of Pop system, that's kind of their MO. But I think it's going to fit well because it's different than Brad Stevens. Jaylen Brown talked about it at media day. He was like, tough coaching from Brad isn't really tough coaching. And that's not a bad thing. That's just the way it is. Brad Stevens isn't a guy that's going to really get in your face, kind of hold you accountable. Sure, he can get fired up at times, but Ime Udoka, I think, is a little bit different. A lot of guys have talked about that tough coaching element. Like you said, a lot of this stuff sort of gets overblown in training camp a little bit. Like there's talking points, and with Ime Udoka, it's the tough coaching element. And yeah, that is going to be a difference maker, but I think it's going to take some time for us to really tell some of the main differences between him and Brad Stevens.
I'm boiling it down here in an unfair way to be, just upfront. But, the way you just described it, it's almost like it sounds like Brad Stevens is, more the psychological coach. I've made the running joke forever about, like he's your prototypical life coach. Like if I could have Brad just telling me how to live my days and give me those pep talks every morning when I wake up, that would be wonderful. But then Ime Udoka, it's almost like it's a louder version. It's more X's and O's. Like you said, it's more in your face. And we'll come to see exactly what all that means. We've heard the reputation, and obviously this guy has been beloved at all of his stops. He's got the ultimate respect of players, and LaMarcus Aldridge chose San Antonio largely because of Udoka and Al Horford and Josh Richardson. These guys have spent time with him in other places. So he is a guy who is obviously well respected, but taking, I guess, the in your face thing a little bit further, what does that mean? I mean, what should these players expect when you say it's going to be harder coaching?
I think Enes Kanter put it pretty well following the second day of practice yesterday. He said that he's not going to tell you what you want to hear. He's going to tell you what you need to hear. And I think, of course, Brad Stevens would do that on occasion, but I think Udoka makes a point to do that. He makes a point of accountability. He makes a point of kind of telling you exactly what you need, whether you like it or not. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good change. If a coach is around for long enough, after a while, like in any professional dynamic, that kind of grows old at times. And sometimes you do need to freshen things up and you need a new voice in there. So I think Kanter saying he's going to tell you what you need to hear is a good thing. Maybe it's little things like at the end of practice the other day, they were shooting free throws to determine if they were going to keep running at the end of practice. I covered Brad Stevens for a while. I don't ever remember seeing that. Maybe they did do that, but just little things like that I think make a difference in sort of changing the locker room dynamic, changing the dynamic of a team. And I think that's important because the Celtics, I think, they were in need of that following last season.
See, that's why Evan and I, every handful of shows or so, we don't work together. Just voices get stale.
Shake things up.
One another after a little while. Yeah, you got to mix it up. How much do you think we spent a lot of time over the course of last year and into the offseason before the changes? I guess there wasn't much of an offseason before the changes. A lot of it happening right after that Nets series loss. But we fixated on this issue quite a bit. Maybe you have in the past as well. Just different voices in general, not just the head coach. Like this. If we had this conversation when you were on the last time around, like I would have thought it was absolutely insane to suggest Brad Stevens would not be the head coach of this team this year. But I absolutely thought there would be changes to his bench, new voices, veteran NBA players, sort of the Walter McCarty type more so than the Evan Turner type. As we know, Udoka played in the league. Damon Stoudemire obviously is a guy that jumps out. When you're looking at just the overall changes strictly to the bench, not front office, not the team and depth and all of that, just the bench. How much of a transformation do you expect here from the Stevens regime and all of those coaches that are for the most part now gone, basically with the exception of like Joe Mazzulla, to what we have now?
Yeah, I think there's certainly going to be a change. I don't think it's going to be visible immediately because I think that stuff takes time with coaching staff, and coaches have to, whether you're an assistant like David Stoudemire or Ime Udoka as a head coach, it takes a while to sort of instill your new practices on guys because guys like Marcus Smart, they have only been coached by Brad Stevens in the NBA. It's their only NBA coach. So a lot of those habits are going to be, instilled in them. And it's it's second nature to them. So those changes are going to take time. That being said, it's going to make a change, and that's inevitable just because for the most part, like you said, outside of guys like Joe Mazzulla, Evan Brads, there's a lot of new faces in there. And I think that's a good thing because the Celtics were kind of running in circles a little bit. I thought Marcus Smart's interview with Jay King from The Athletic was pretty interesting. He noted that he was pretty sure Brad Stevens was getting tired of coaching and was getting ready to leave. And the only reason he stuck around last year was for the guys. And if Marcus Smart knew that, Jaylen Brown probably knew that, Jason Tatum probably knew that. So it certainly was a need for this team to freshen up the coaching staff quite a bit. And I think it's a good thing. And I think the dynamic is going to change in terms of being able to see that from a fan's perspective. I just think that might take a little bit of time, and that's okay.
I'm going to pick on our buddy Keith Smith, who obviously does an amazing job covering the team and the entire league. And, he wrote an article, he put it out today for Celtics blog about how, if there's one clear theme about this team here early in camp and media day and all of that, this is Jason Tatum's and Jaylen Brown's team. And, I come out of that. And in fairness, I haven't read the article yet, so I'm sure he went more in depth, but just looking at how it was promoted and the headline and all of that, I come out of it and I say, well, obviously, no crap. Like we've been here on this show, we've been talking about that for a year plus. Like last year, it wasn't Kemba Walker's team anymore. It was Jason Tatum's team. It was Jaylen Brown's team. Now, maybe I haven't read it. So maybe what Keith wrote was more expansive with respect to, now Brad's not in the picture and it's a new head coach. And it's just all of this versus just these two all-stars, borderline all-NBA players taking that next step. But I guess to build on that, what I wonder is, what we've heard from these guys like Jason Tatum going back to Team USA and winning a gold medal and Udoka being an assistant with that team. Obviously, we know, like he's talked a lot about Udoka and he's all in. And now hearing it from Jaylen Brown, who is talked about buying in, he's got his full attention and all of that. Horford has shouted him out. Smart, having had experience with him back at FIBA a couple of years ago, has talked about Udoka's leadership. When you have, especially those first two, the quote unquote pillars of this team going so above and beyond talking about their respect for Ime Udoka before he's coached even a single preseason game, how much does that filter down to the rest of the team?
I think it certainly filters down to the rest of the team, but also if you were on, I think it's obvious that they're going to do that right early on because it's their new boss. Well, yeah, you're going to say good things about your new boss first couple of days. I think it makes sense. You'd expect them to do that, but I do think it filters down because those guys are the pillars. And whether it was the case or not in years past, they are now the two main guys. I think sometimes over the last couple of years, yeah, it was very clear that it was Tatum and Brown's team from the outside. And Kemba Walker could say that as much as he wanted, but there was always the little look over their shoulder because there's an all-star, a 9-year, 8-year vet in there who was also pretty prominent. So I think now that they are the two voices, hearing those guys voice their support and really show that they are really, really behind Ime Udoka, like you said, Jaylen Brown was super vocal about that. I think it's important. You hear guys like Marcus Smart say it. I think it's really important, especially for some of the younger guys, but it's a good locker room dynamic, it seems like, because a lot of these vets that Brad Stevens brought in, they have some experience with Udoka. They're also bought in, but it's just a nice kind of filter or filler, I should say, to have underneath Brown and Tatum as those young pillars.